In today's LEGO City update, I'll be designing a new building, which will then be placed into the LEGO City. As always, the most important part when it comes to buildings is the facade, and that's why I've skipped the back walls. As you can see, they are simply normal bricks stacked onto each other, and I'm immediately starting off with the facade, the windows and the windowsill, and then what will be the main defining feature of this new building are these brick modifieds with tan colored gold ingots attached to them in order to create this sort of brick structure. The main advantage of using gold ingots instead of normal flat tiles is the enhanced shadow you get through this small angle at the side of the gold ingots. I'll also later on in this video show you a real-life example from a building in my hometown, which actually looks like it was built out of these gold ingots, which was actually an inspiration for this particular building I'm designing right now. In the meantime, I've added more profile bricks. I always use brick modifieds because that's essentially what adds structure. And also, if you have these really monotone buildings with not a lot of color to them, I figured out over time that's by far the most important aspect of designing different buildings. Now you can see me adding the door for the building. I've actually completely designed the door myself. Normally I like to use the original pre-molded doors by LEGO, but in this case they didn't really fit to the windows, and so I've decided to build them myself. They are a bit more chunky and different to build in, so it needs more space in order to open, but in the end I've managed to do that as well. And now it's time to add a bit color, just a tiny touch of color with a few flowers on the windowsill. The upper floor of the building is basically the same as downstairs. The only thing I obviously needed to change was the door in the center, so I've added windows there. And now this is my comparison to a real-life example of these sort of gold ingots I've mentioned earlier on in this video. The only thing that's missing is LEGO providing us with 1x1 or 1x4 gold ingots in order to improve this brick structure. Now it's time for the roof, and that's actually the part I've probably spent most time on designing. Firstly, I've added inverted slopes in order to create the transition from the dark tan profile bricks onto the dark bluish gray slopes of the roof. For the roof itself, I'm using 1x2 slopes, and every second slope I've added one plate beneath it in order to create a difference in height. This simply adds more structure to the building and makes the roof actually fit the facade, which would otherwise not be the case. You cannot simply add a modern flat roof onto this sort of facade. Having all that done, it's finally time for the best part of this update, which is of course adding the building into the LEGO City layout. This new building we've just finished will be the start of a new row of houses along the path I've made last week. The only thing I'm doing at this point is modifying the path in order to fit the entrance onto the path itself and then adding stairs. And now, in order for you to have a perspective of how big or small this new building is, I've added an original modular building. I always like to have the comparison between original LEGO buildings and my mocks. The reason, as you can see, I've designed it smaller than original modular buildings is I want the city to continue behind these buildings, which will actually also go around the corner. So having these very tall modular buildings in front would sort of block the view of the rest of the city, which is then behind this row of houses in front. This is exactly why I'm sizing down the buildings I'm adding on top there. Although I gotta say, I love the shop in front right here. It's probably one of my all-time favorite modular buildings, but simply too big, as I've mentioned. By the way, all the interior design work will be done in future, but to be honest with you, right now I want to design the facades, the building itself, and then in a few weeks or months or whatever, as soon as I finished a few buildings, I'll make one video where I'm finishing the interior work of all the different buildings that I've accumulated up to this point. So with that being said, that's it for this week's update. I really hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you again in the next one.